It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
All right, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted weekly from a kitchen bench in Kings in Auckland, New Zealand, and indeed that's where I am. This isn't any theatre, folks. I'm at the kitchen bench. It's I don't know, give time stamps, day stamps, funny in the old podcast, because you want that illusion of whenever you listen, it could be anywhere, but it is Saturday afternoon. So I point that out because there may be some bangs, crashes, drilling noises, sounds of similar to billiard tables being dragged. That's a little gag there for regular listeners in terms of what's going on next door. What's going on next door, folks, is progress. You can't get away in the middle of that, can you? Not even on the 6th day of the week. The 7th day, on the Sunday, if the progress happens, to be honest, you do feel like stopping the progress, but owing to the whole landowner, tenant-landlord dilemma, you kind of want to we just want to play your cards right. And I am, unfortunately, a tenant by birth. So if there's some jewels and some bangs, I've decided I have to let my life's progress briefly interfere with that progress, although that progress is probably more likely to interfere with us. But please don't think that while the guest's here, there's going to be that noise in the background. Oh, look, there's no noise now. Maybe said host has gone mad and it's all in his head. Hello. So this week we speak to an icon. I guess it's a word probably overused, but sometimes you do use words in the right context in terms of dance music culture, DJ culture in New Zealand. An iconic figure indeed, Mr. Greg Churchill. I've always liked Greg on a personal level. Not the sort of relationship where we say, hey, go for coffee, go for a beer, but we always enjoy a good chat and a catch up when we see each other, and it's been that way since sometime in the 90s when I met him. We've reacquainted through the good old Facebook and hung out a little bit. I think I went to a birthday a couple of years ago. But I've been meaning to get him in for a while, but I didn't really ascertain whether I was feeling him out as to whether he was being polite or not. But I said, hey, I really need a guest this week. And he said, yeah, let's do it one afternoon this week. So we did. It was great. We'll have a little bit more of a corrido about the corrido in a second. Aside from that, students come back to work next week, taking over a new audio paper. I'm increasingly becoming the audio guy at work, which I have no problems with because the week breezed by this week working on that stuff, trying to get the studio I hadn't used up and running, which looked kind of like the Star Trek Enterprise, sans doors that go shoop. Be doing some Foley. Never done Foley before, but I'm looking forward to setting up a Foley setup. You know what Foley is? Google some Foley. Watch some Foley. Watch some Foley unfoldy. It's pretty exciting. It's one part of post-production sound, where the sound effects are added by real people in real time, and it's a real art. I wish I'd known things like that existed when I was thinking about what to do with a career. I could be the Foley guy. I wonder if there is New Zealand's foremost Foley expert. If someone knows about him or her, hit me up. I notice there's a lot of women in the game, because a lot of that stuff's kind of quite a male-dominated territory for some reason, but there's a lot of female ones. That was coffee. Hey, the bangs have stopped. Now, I listen to some good podcasts. I assume that podcast listeners, or listeners to my podcast, are podcast listeners in general. And I don't know if I've talked about how many I listen to. It's reasonably unhealthy, but I do listen to a lot of them a week. I've actually just started realising lately I'm not listening as much as I used to. The classic old man in the garage with the transistor. Maybe I'm becoming that guy. They're just on to have talking around. But I listened to 3 killer episodes in the last few days, 2 from one podcast and 1 from the other. Okay, so one I recommend. Some people Russell Brand does their heads in. I quite like him. They say he's interrupty. If you listen to my podcast, then you should be fine with interrupty. He did one with quite famous activist Naomi Klein. And whereas a lot of commentators these days tend to be quite negative or quite maybe fatalistic about where the world's going, she acknowledges issues and problems. I mean, that's been her career. But she's extraordinarily optimistic in the podcast. But more compellingly, I found, she doesn't seem to think the neoliberal ideology is going to be as much of an issue going into the future as it has been in the past, and I won't spoil why she thinks that. I'll let you listen to the podcast and ponder that if such issues are up your proverbial alley. The other one I listen to these a lot, is 99% Invisible. Some of them I find more interesting than others. They're kind of little vignettes. I'll have to Google whether I use the right word after this. Little standalone episodes about different topics, more documentary style than chat style, like myself or Russell. Put us in the same boat there. Myself or Mark or Russell or Joe. And the two I listened to, one was about skateboarding. It's called Pool and Stream, and it's about the birth of skateboarding, but then also where those kidney-shaped pools they all started skating in LA back in the day actually originated from. It might be Hungary. And the other one was really interesting. The episode straight after that's just gone up was about how the birth control pill was repackaged, but about a whole lot of other issues around the pill and women and their rights to do what the hell they want with their bodies and old school doctors, etc., etc. So that's 3 recommendations. Goodness, I've been going, this is turning into one of those long intros. I've been trying to avoid the long intros. Oh shit, now I'm talking and it's going to keep going on and you might tune out. Where's the other guy to say some other stuff? Oh my god. Oh, that's right. Like the show. Like the show on iTunes. Please become a friend on Facebook at Verbal Highs Podcast, or just search out Dr. Tennants. At Verbal Highs on Twitter. Hey, I'm sort of running out of a reasonably steady flow of guests, so if you have any ideas, by all means, verbalhighs@gmail. Get in touch regarding anything else. If you want a private message, verbalhighs@gmail. But particularly if you have a guest in mind or you think you might want to come on, now's the time to hit us up. I was going to talk a bit about what Greg and I chatted about, but I think I've been at it for this bit long enough now, and I'm willing the drills and so on to come back if I keep chatting. So actually one thing, we talk about impeachment on the podcast, and here's some factoids before we go on. There were 3 people threatened with impeachment in the US government's history, US presidential history. Johnston in 1868 was acquitted by a single vote, so dodged a bullet. Clinton was also acquitted. A lot of people think Nixon was impeached, but he actually stepped down before it could happen. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Churchill.
This is Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. What have I been up to? Well, the greater pick.
He says with a smirk on his face.
Yeah, well, it's kind of it's a really. I can go into very much a lot of detail with that question. I could on
record or off record.
Oh no, it's all fine. It's just like generally, really good. Best headspace I think I've ever been in my life.
Really? Fucking hell.
Just loving life, and yeah, it's great. I'm just DJing.
It's fucking great, man.
One night a week. I'm slowly getting my production buzz back, but for the last 3 years prior to this, my life was a living hell. Yeah. I went through a really horrible divorce. Yeah. Lost both my parents. Both my parents died on me. But I think I went through severe depression. Lots of dark shit. I
obviously through Tim and Dave and stuff. I don't know you well enough to sort of check in with you about it online.
Yeah.
But I kind of knew all that was going on. So that's good to hear, man.
But I've come out the other side, and just with a great zest, and a
fucking cool new partner by the sounds of things.
Yeah, and I think
sugar?
I'd just milk, please, Lewis. Yeah. I just feel really like positive, and in a sense that I've probably never felt before.
Cool.
And how about you?
Well, I can't top that.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I've interesting times. I've decided not to drink booze again. Full stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is in this society we live in is an interesting one. But I found, it's like, once you get to sort of, I don't know, post 40 or whatever, people don't really You know what I mean? No one's like, what are you fucking up to? Or maybe it's my circles or whatever. But it is an interesting one in terms of that's the default. Like, we've done a good this, or I want to get to know you better because I work with you. Let's go for a beer. That's what people. It's just the thing they say. You know. Yeah. But so we'll see how it goes.
I didn't drink for 5 years at one point, and I've got to say, I kind of enjoy just a drink.
Yeah. Chartreuse.
Yeah, but you know what? I've given up drinking beer pretty much, and just a couple of good shots. Hate wine. Hate the effect wine has on me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that with chartreuse, because I remember from the bar I was running in Melbourne. Like you're right, chartreuse is like just a little pa-ting.
Oh, it whacks it.
But it's almost got a drug-like quality when taken like that. It's like a good whiskey. It's sort of it makes you sort of a lot of clarity as well as the as the booze buzz.
But the other part of I'm not standing there with a beer in my hand all night or a glass of wine as well. So it's kind of like just get that little hit of that or tequila, and that's it. I kind of like this air of positiveness as well. And,
Okay, well, with me is DJ, multiple award-winning DJ, music producer, radio host, and general man about the music scene, Greg Churchill. Hello.
Hi, Lewis.
I was thinking today, like you're sort of like whenever I've chatted to you over the years, I always love whatever comes forth from your mouth. It's always very insightful, you know, good humoured and so on. But you kind of pick this what you call it, an occupation, this passion, this life thing that actually involves not hearing a lot from you in that sense, but hearing a lot from you musically. So I appreciate you saying, I'll come in and chat to you for 80 minutes. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Well, you didn't say that actually, to your credit. You started off. You were at uni before you just. I know the early part of your life's kind of off told. I looked around online and stuff, but the American politics thing interested me. Was that a major for like a BA or something, or were you going to do that for masters?
I started my masters, and I was into the 5th year, and it just bored me.
5th year of undergrad and then masters.
I was into my masters at that point. I remember coming home. I'd shifted back to my parents' place, and I remember throwing it all under the bed. Just going, I've had enough. And at that point, the lure of music, of student radio, it was just too great.
And was it? Have I got that right? It was a masters in something to do with American politics.
Yeah.
What was it? Can you remember what you were looking at?
Yeah, I was pretty heavily involved with America's involvement in Nicaragua at the time.
Wow.
And that was very topical with the whole Contra thing. There was a lot of meddling with the Reagan government, but
early 80s, right?
Yep. Yeah. But at the end of the day, just my heart wasn't into it. I wanted to pursue music.
Strange time to be looking at the States then in terms of economics as well, because kind of everything that they did has led to where we are in the world now, right? The whole neo.
I can't but help reflect on what I was studying
and where we are now,
and applying it to now.
Yeah. We'll just do an hour on politics. That's what I did with Dave Roper. I wasn't expecting it, but where do you think we are with that, man? How do you? You just said you're in the best headspace you've ever been, but the planet's kind of not in the best headspace it's ever been. What's your take on this whole who's running the world at the moment thing?
Well, you know what? I've found I always used to think I used to love the 4-year cycle, the 8-year cycle of American politics.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I would just suddenly find myself leading into an election, just camped on the television, flicking between CNN and the ghastly Fox News, just to see what they were saying, what was coming out, perspectives. It just intrigues me as much as the 4-year cycle of the Olympics or the Football World Cup. Yeah. But I'm finding myself, this is kind of like a year into the year after, it was 6 months after the election, a year past the process of And I'm still sitting there fixated by what's happening in American politics. And I've had to do a lot of catch up.
I was just going to say, do you find some days, because it's funny you say that, like, I used to just kind of tune into Fox and CNN, probably read the local paper and whatever. Now I find there's so much information and so many perspectives that I think about 3 days after the actual American election, I just went, I'm done, and kind of shut the laptop. And I walked away from it all for a few days. Where do you think we're going to end up, man? What's going to happen with Trump? It's like almost like a bookie's question, right?
I sat there this morning for about an hour and watched CNN, just thinking, this is just such a mess that's just building and building. And 2 or 3 months ago, I was sitting there hoping, thinking, right, they've got enough to impeach him. But he talked about draining the swamp. He's just filling the swamp with so much. And I just wonder, at what point does it just like overflow? And it's like, we've overflowed, we've got all the information we require, we've got him. And it's almost like I'm just waiting for that moment. There's that South Park about Obama winning, Yes We Can. And, and it almost will feel like it's some sort of celebration from the left, because at the end of the day, if you don't know me, I've been an total lefty my entire life. Nothing will ever sway or budge me from this point of view.
You don't generally meet a lot of right-wing DJs.
No, you don't actually. However, this will feel like one of the greatest victories, I think.
So you think he's going to go down in some way, shape or form before the end of his term?
Definitely before the end of his term. But anyone who thinks it's going to happen in the next few months is absolutely misled.
Yeah.
It could take 3 years, but that swamp will just get more and more murkier.
You've kind of done a Shrek analogy there. We've got Shrek running the world, okay? So, and two things there are just, because as I say, in this world of sea of information we live in, two observations there. First one is I ended up on a internet treasure hunt about impeachment. It turns out only 2 presidents have been impeached. It's actually harder than you think it is. People think who's the 70s?
Nixon.
People think Nixon was impeached, but he actually stepped down before he was impeached, wasn't he?
I don't think there'll be any impeachment here, but I think there'll be such pressure, and at some point...
You think his own party will...
Yeah, the likes of Paul Ryan and these guys. There's a great former Republican, Richard Painter, who's well worth following on Twitter.
Yeah.
He's the sort of Republican we can all love. He's like a professor in politics at one of the major American universities. He's so sharp, and he's just absolutely willing to go there.
Yeah.
I could sit there and read this guy's tweets all day, plus all the correspondence and replies that he's receiving. So it's an absolutely beautiful moment for anyone who's studied politics or followed politics.
Well, it's good to hear that there are, as you say, people like... I hate the whole side thing these days as well. I think that's really tired and unproductive, but essentially someone on that side, if there are people agitating. The other thing I was going to say before we move off politics is I just think visually, and this is such a... amateur stab in the dark from where I am, but I've just been noticing lately visually Trump looks like he's starting to crack a bit. He's sort of staring off into the distance, and I just think I don't know whether will he personally last the distance. I don't know. Christchurch.
Yes.
Early 80s, politics. Don't want to do the major. Discover Student Radio, which is something I did at uni as well, bless them, when they used to be up on campus everywhere, which is, I assume, where you found them. But you start playing music that no one else is playing. How'd that work out? Was that sort of like, were you frowned upon back then, or...?
No. There was sort of a sequence and a lead-up of events that sort of got me there. I found myself being intrigued by this writer in Christchurch when I was still at school called Rob White, and he wrote the reviews in the Christchurch Star, which was like the major daily before the press became number one.
Yeah.
And I was just intrigued by all this music that he was writing about back then, which was kind of, the alternative, more the alternative American stuff. Plus, on top of that, Barry Jenkins.
Yeah.
And what he was playing.
I didn't realise he was syndicated throughout all of New Zealand.
Yeah, so
Right.
I just remember reading what Rob was writing, hearing what Barry was playing, and I just caught this thing about different music.
Yeah.
And I even can think back further, like maybe when I was 12 or 13, I was kind of buying music that, like the first 7-inch single I ever bought was Parliament Flashlight. And, for a white boy...
That's much cooler than mine. Mine was Star Trekking by The Firm.
Only going forward 'cause we can't find reverse.
Right, we'll just end that there.
I was 11. Anyway, yeah.
So I just... there was just all these like sort of steps along the way of intrigue with different music.
Yeah.
And experiences. By the time I left school, I was that guy who, if my friends were playing, and they were playing the Eagles and Dire Straits, and I would be in the room next door and I would go in and change the music they were playing and walk out. Or we would go to parties and I would have pre-made mixtapes,
yeah.
and I would like take that mixtape out, destroy that tape and put my tape in. So there was sort of these...
So you were kind of like both the music police and the music army at the same time.
Very much so,
yeah.
But there was sort of like no sort of conscious sort of reason or decision to get to that point,
yeah.
other than thinking when student radio became really large on my radar,
yeah.
that I wanted to be part of that. And it took me about 12 months of harassing Michael Higgins, who was the station manager at the time, and he finally he took a shine to me. I think because I liked REM, and very few people at that point liked REM.
Yeah.
And that was very student radio
yeah.
when they were on
yeah.
IRS, before they had any, they'd only probably had the 2 albums at that point.
Yeah.
And away I went. But I think much to Michael's dismay, I had this secret love of black music.
That's what I was meaning in those slightly racist days of New Zealand.
So I was able to show him this one side of me,
yeah.
Yet he was unaware that I was going to bring to the station. And I quickly found plenty of other people who shared the same love.
Yeah.
This love of black music.
Where are we, mid-'80s?
No, we're talking...
Early 80s?
83, I suppose. Yeah.
So early days for student radio really taking off as well. Now, I've got to get this on record because I just cracked up to myself when you mentioned it before. I think it's the third time of all the music in the canons of history of the world you've brought up the Eagles. Can you please verbalise for us now exactly what it is you hate about the Eagles?
When I was in the 5th form, we had a music class, and I remember by this point of time there was me and this other guy, and we absolutely loved the Police, and I think his name might have been Nick, and he would sit up the back of the class, and I'd kind of faintly join in as he sang Roxanne, much to the dismay of whatever class we were in.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on a red light. Those days are over. You don't have to sell your body to the night.
Anyway, there was this one guy whose name I can clearly remember, but I'm not going to name him. He thought it was really cool to bring the fucking Hotel California in for music class to listen to it, as well as Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which, I don't know, maybe I should go back and have a listen to that. But anyway, my hate of the Eagles began at that moment when I was in the 5th form. And, we're talking 1978 by now. So punk rock is kicking.
And the Eagles versus punk rock is like, that kind of sums up everything, really, doesn't it?
It totally sums it up.
And you know what I love about that? Hotel California has just haunted us from there on in. You just can't escape it.
And it's really hard for people who, maybe 10 years younger than me. They sort of maybe look at me like, how can you hate the Eagles? And it's like, you
10 years younger.
But
you weren't there.
You weren't there. That's the point. And the whole thing with punk music and what happened, and this was the great thing about student radio, I think, right across New Zealand, is the political side.
Yeah.
The lyrics, just there was... This is where I am today.
It was an era of change here as well. Punk came on through. Everyone hasn't surprised me because that's what people globally say is the punk thing's more often than not related to the black music coming in thing.
And then you think historically, like we're really unaware of it at the time. But when you look what was happening in New York with the punk scene there, the disco scene, and the hip-hop scene, you just see how it is all so intertwined and, and related.
And a lot of my students don't know that the reason they're wearing shell-toe Adidas and baseball caps now is directly traceable back to hip-hop. Yeah, everywhere. And
I've got another story on that
go on.
as well, is that... I remember having this infatuation with trainers when I was probably about this age.
Yeah.
And my father, he had the franchise for Pony.
Really? For New Zealand?
For the South Island. He ran the South Island side of it. And so I worked in his warehouse after school when I was in first years at university.
So you're all G'd up in 1982.
And he had these rows and rows of Pony trainers. And, and now Pony's just kind of off the radar. But
if you still had some fresh pairs of those from back then.
But Pony back then was a big deal, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Tyson was,
big, even late 80s it was big when I was growing up, kind of PI fashion, big hip-hop, kind of Pacific Island fashion in Wellington. I don't know about the rest of... Imagine if you'd held on to at least one of each of those pairs of those shoes, man.
There was that documentary that came out about, and I think it was Ian Brown from the Stone Roses and someone else, and they went to this shop that had been discovered somewhere in Argentina, that the guy who owned it was refusing to sell any of the stock, and it was just jam-packed. It was like a warehouse full of old school Adidas.
That's right. Yeah. And that one guy sitting with that old cash register.
Yeah, and I just think back now to that warehouse that I worked, this cold old warehouse that I looked after for my father. I'd be filling out the orders for a bit of extra money to get me through university. And there was just rows and rows.
But were you rocking the Pony to uni?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've even got photos.
So back then, I'm it's like one slow boat from England, as it were, with a 3-week-old copy of NME,
I used to
tales of airline stewardesses bringing in records and so on. But another thing I read today in my 2 minutes of research is in the midst of this kind of much different environment to today in terms of all of that. There's a bar called Romanos full of American soldiers and so on.
So this is 1989.
Yeah.
And,
so why are they stationed here?
Well, Christchurch had the Air Force base,
right,
that then went to McMurdo Sound or Scott Base or whatever the final destination down there was. And so during summer, you just had this influx of American
military.
Yeah, I was going to say soldiers, but no, military.
So they had tunes with them and...
They had tunes in their head,
yeah,
and they had experiences. And I remember the first year in '89 when we took over this Tuesday night at Romanov's in Christchurch. They were all from New Jersey. The bulk of them were from New Jersey. And 1989 in New Jersey, it was the biggest house scene.
I was about to say, I didn't want to get my date wrong, but I was about to say house music.
In the world.
Yeah.
And these guys wanted to hear house music.
Did you find it for them?
We had it for them.
Yes.
And they loved us.
Yeah. And they're like, we're in kind of bubble fuck on the other side of the world, and this guy's playing...
And maybe, when I sort of reflect now, part of the reason why we were able to, so easily, to sort of push this house music at the time was there was this influx of black American... military who came in and they danced, and this is what they wanted to hear. And we had the tracks records of the DJ Internationals and that, and Phase 2 reached in. And
what did that involve, Greg, back then? Were you working at a record shop where was there a distributor you were ordering off in the States, just like went through the 90s and 2000s? Is that how you were getting them, or
no,
were you sending off the back of...
funny enough, I bought my first house records I ever bought were in 1986, I think, from Scott Bollock in Palmerston North. And I also had a friend, he was the guy...
There you go, Palmerston North, that's house music history right there.
Yeah, and I had a friend who owned a bookshop, and Dave Ramsden, and he had owned record stores in Camden, and that Dave was probably 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
But we had this underlying love of house music. So we just decided we couldn't get it. we just started bringing it in, and there would be we'd have a crate at the front of the counter at the bookshop.
So through the bookshop, you got an account at some distributor like Watts or whatever in the States?
In New York. It was definitely in New York.
Yeah.
And I remember those excited trips out to the airport to bring, these 2 boxes of records back. We'd take what we wanted and we'd sell the rest.
Which is kind of the system that went through till about the early 2000s, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So we were well and truly flush with good tunes, and prior to that we'd bought a lot of compilations, and we quickly worked out that we were also required the 12 inches. But when it came down to it, when we started playing, we had ample fuel.
When I started DJing, much later than you, admittedly, those compilations early on, if I had a good record shop employee who could recommend me a good compilation on wax, those really got me on my feet, because they got me like thinking about what I liked and what I didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't know, things like, I'm trying to think back then, stuff like Dope on Plastic compilations, all that kind of early mid 90s, those comps, they kind of, without those, I would have been kind of spending 3 times the amount of money to figure out the same things I was trying to figure out.
And they're all relatively DJ friendly.
Well, that's right. They're pressed well, 2 aside. If they're done well, 3 aside. Not like 12 aside on some of those late 80s comps. I reckon there's something in that that influence of the military here, and I've only started learning about it lately because I've got this heaps older colleague at work. He's actually at professor level, and he's really into his music, but I thought he was a real kind of just white music sort of a guy. Right. We went out for a few beers, and he was talking about how in the 70s, same thing, I think he lived down south, and he had this huge knowledge of funk and soul, and I'm like, where did you get that from? And he told pretty much the same story you did, but I think in the 70s in Christchurch, where he was turned on to a whole lot of music they had on them.
Right.
So it's an interesting history, because I didn't even know we really had American military here, right? Do we still? I don't even know. Do we still have American military?
Surely, I think it's
surely,
because I don't think probably the numbers are what they were. Like 20 years ago.
Because we're not as because we're not as strategically aligned, are we?
But I still think Christchurch is the last point before they head to the south.
Right, that would make sense. So around that era, late 80s, you ended up probably one of the best places to be in the world at that time, which is in the UK for 88, 89?
89.
Was that quite the eye-opener?
Oh, it was seriously unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the first time walking down the street, and like I lived in Holland Park, just straight off Notting Hill.
First sojourn outside of around here? First big OE?
Oh no, I'd been away a few times, but this is the first time to the UK, and so I arrived on a Saturday, and so living in Holland Park, and the next stop is Notting Hill, and I'm just itching to get there. I'm a bit of a wreck on the Saturday. I remember getting up on the Sunday, and I arrived. It was about this time of the year. It was like peak of summer, which really for me wasn't much of a summer, but apparently it was the best summer that I'd had in 20 years anyway. And seriously, like walking down Portobello Road for the first time on a Sunday afternoon, I don't know how many records I bought. And here's me talking about house music, but I bought so much reggae and so many reggae 12s that day.
Yeah, and you hadn't even got to Brixton yet.
No, and I didn't even have anything to play them on when I got back home.
Yeah. It's funny with music things, like when I first got to London, I just don't get the logic of this now. I was really into American house music at the time. So here I am in London buying imports from the US, not even thinking about it like that. The day I got there was the day before Bank Holiday, and I went to Notting Hill and didn't even... someone said, this thing called Carnival's on.
Right.
I think I wept on the second day. Like I don't think I've really wept tears of joy.
Yeah.
But I remember that I wept through just like, I can't. This is too much overload. So what did the Summer of Love look like? It's kind of like a tagline for an era, But was there something in the air?
Oh, it was. How do you start? Where do you start? It was something else.
Yeah.
To I'm not even sure how to. It was just everywhere. There was so much to do.
Yeah.
I remember being at the Soul to Soul sound system, and they were recording the latest Rebel MC video. And if you look at some point in that video, you can see me.
A guy in pony gear in the corner.
I had a grey New Balance track on. I was the only white boy, and I'm dancing out of time with everyone else. There was just so much on. I remember going out every night of the week. I didn't go there to work. I blew all my money. I had to sell my saxophone to pay for my airfare home, which I did like in late November because the weather was starting to kill me at that point, and the sun had gone and the fun was over. And I had so many records at that point that I'd bought, and I just wanted to bring them home and start playing them.
And you're pretending that your bag's really light at check-in, but it weighs about 60 kilo, and you're trying not to buckle over as you check in. I
came home with a mixer and bags, and then
They let you on. They let you on. You hear horror stories of people getting charged like hundreds of pounds to bring all that stuff back. And you must have got to know the locals pretty quickly and found the kind of warehouse empty field scene of the time as well. Did you do some of those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I often look at a few of those videos that go up online and wonder, was that one or not?
Yeah. I sometimes look at them and go, I'm glad there weren't a lot of cameras and so on around while I was dancing back in those days. I quite like it being up here.
Yeah.
Are you with me there?
Totally, yeah. Well, I can still picture really clearly the first time I'm walking down this side street off Portobello Road, and a guy offers me an E.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to ask Greg, but yeah.
And I was shocked. I was horrified. I didn't know which way to look, whether I was being set up here.
Is this during the day or actually going to a party?
It was during the day.
Oh, the summer of love.
And I'm like, no.
But yes.
No, no.
But yes.
No, it took me a little bit. It might have taken me another week or so. I went home and had a few conversations with people. Just to go, I'm not going to end up in jail for this.
No, I think they've gone mainstream. And talk about, talk about a perspective changer on top of everything else. Those things taught me to think about the world a little bit of a different way. You come back to New Zealand, that must be a sort of weird cultural shift as well, coming back from that to back here. How did you deal with that? You came back energised or kind of like, what do I do next?
Absolutely energised. And in many ways I've seen other people do this where, people have come back from Melbourne or they come back from Berlin and they're just like fizzing with what they've experienced and they just want to bring it back and go, hey, fuck, this is what it's all about.
Which is how things
listen
kind of
to these tunes.
built back here.
And that's exactly the person that I was, because I sort of see them now and just go, just calm down a little bit, okay? Because it's not going to work out as you're expecting.
Let Uncle Greg bring you down here.
Because I came back and I remember I got my records back and I'd be up all night practicing and mixing and just getting my head, and I couldn't wait for that Tuesday night. And guess what? I bring Black Box back. No one's really got it in New Zealand at this point. Clears the dance floor.
Yeah.
All these tracks clear the dance floor, and I'm like, oh, wow. Digital Underground, I played that, cleared the dance floor. 6 months later, they're the biggest tunes in the club, and no one's remembered that you were the first person to
Black Box
play
made it onto commercial radio.
Yeah. But it taught me a lesson that, having favourite tunes as a DJ can be a really risky job. And I just remember those first few times, my excitement playing them and my utter disappointment as people just looked up at me in the booth going, I'm not really keen on this one.
Do you think there's also such a thing as being too far ahead of the curve?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it all comes down to you've got to play your crowd, you've got to play your city. Sometimes I'm bewildered by how people will embrace New Zealand music. We will embrace New Zealand film and culture, but we fail to sometimes embrace club life.
Yeah,
and how I played in Wellington a couple of weeks ago for the first time in years, and it totally lived up to my expectation in everything. But at the same time, it was quite a lot different than what Auckland is. And
can you explain that? I'm really interested in that, Because I was going to ask you along these lines.
Sometimes these are just like feelings, and it can just be to do with the environment and the room. It felt every bit as good, but it felt so quite remarkably different as well. Yeah. Just as, like, I'm playing in Queenstown in a few weeks. I'm doing like 3 gigs down there over the weekend, and who knows what it's going to be, but these ideas of sometimes trying to recreate what we've experienced overseas, I think can at times also be a little sort of disrespectful to what is already established.
Or maybe like you're like, I totally hear you, or maybe like because you're trying to sort of consciously or subconsciously replicate something that's gone before, it's somehow weirdly forced, even though you don't mean it to be, because you're like, shit, it's got to be like this again, it's got to be like this again. Yeah, I do that with all sorts of things, you know, like, yeah. And so Wellington, you know, different, like, have cities sort of, because, you know, you're almost like you'd be a great person to mine for the psychology, you know, human psychology, especially local psychology. Have the cities changed over the years? Is playing in Wellington now different to playing in Wellington in the 90s?
No, I felt it was every bit as good as then, and it actually felt better. It'd probably be my favourite set I've ever played in Wellington.
Wow, where'd you play?
Sorry?
Where'd you play?
It was Plymouth.
Oh, okay. I'm so out of the loop. Yeah.
So, but, you know, and what I reflected upon then, maybe, you know, when I was playing in Wellington quite regularly in the late 90s, early 2000s, is, you know, what part of the reason it might be better now, because I'm actually probably a better DJ than I was there.
Yeah.
So little things like that. But I think, and I've held Wellington in such high regard, is that for me it was kind of like,
it's a nerdy little art city, but it likes to cut loose and party.
Yeah, but it has this sort of love, this underlying love and appreciation and acknowledgement. I'm not saying that Auckland doesn't, but it's a little bit deeper.
Yeah. It's probably
tough one to really sort of qualify.
Yeah, no, I'm here. It makes sense to me, at least.
But for not having really played to that crowd, sort of excluding the oral trash years where it became, the DJing down there became a bit of a different sort of ball game. But going back to when it was just it was about me, not much had changed. Yeah. If anything had changed really at all.
And so you said a few years. Had you actually not been down there and played in quite a while?
It'd been about 4 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so then what about, let's say you go to Christchurch, what do they expect there? Kind of, this is very summative. What's different? What's Christchurch? How's Christchurch different to Wellington and Auckland?
Christchurch, in Wellington, I felt like I could keep it really deep all night. Yeah, and I did for most of the night, and then just sort of really stepped it up at the end. A difference with Christchurch is I think you could do that for a couple of tracks, and then I think the expectation would be. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I always feel the expectation is
to bang it out a bit more.
The BPMs need to go up a bit, and it needs to be banged out a bit more. Yeah.
Small towns in New Zealand that you found surprising little pockets of party over the years.
They've all been. Some of them have been great. Like thinking about Whangarei. Yeah. Had some amazing gigs there.
Yeah, right.
Gisborne. Yeah. Again, incredible.
Yeah. New Plymouth. I've had great gigs in New Plymouth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even Palmerston North. Yeah. They've all had pluses. I remember speaking to, I think it was Evan from Concord Dawn once, and he'd been to like Westport or somewhere. Yeah. And I think we found him at the waiting for the bus. Sorry, even if I'm telling on you, but no, I think he'd been to Nelson actually, and he just looked like a mess, like he hadn't been to bed all night,
sitting on his crate crying.
But yeah, so yeah, and again, Nelson's always been absolutely.
Well,
amazing.
hang on, you haven't told the Evan story yet.
Yeah, but
that was the story.
This is part of the story.
I'm sure we've all been there.
He told us about he'd played in Westport and Timaru somewhere. Yeah, and sometimes you go, yeah, and again, just nothing but love.
Nothing but love. Yeah. Promoter put him on a bus at 8 in the morning.
Oh,
Loved it till that point.
and he still had to go back to Waiheke Island where he was living at the time.
And then you moved to Auckland, late 90s again. You know, I don't want to. You've sort of repeated. Oh, sorry, mid 90s. You know, I noticed you've had to repeat a lot of this stuff in various press sojourns over the years, but pretty unusual to move, to ask a DJ to move cities, then to go into a new club. Those years, how's Auckland different? Is it any different now?
I kind of get sick of... I will answer your question. I will.
Yeah.
I get sick of people talking about the good old days.
Yeah, I was just, as it came out, I was like, I wish I hadn't asked that.
No.
I'm serious, I did.
Because for me, I think...
I didn't say they were the good old days.
I think right now are the best of days.
Yeah, these are the best of days. Trump.
Yeah, as we watch his demise. Musically...
Smartphones.
But again, it's like...
No, sorry, I'm sorry. Why are these the best of days musically? That's awesome to hear.
The crowds... The crowds I play to, you know, I had an amazing crowd in Wellington the other night. I have amazing crowds every Friday at Ink Bar.
Yeah.
They're on the floor the whole night. Now, okay, maybe I'm a better DJ than I was then. Maybe I wasn't as good as everyone told me I was, or I thought I was. And maybe I'm just a hell of a lot better at reading a floor and working a floor now. But there's always factors that create the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, I actually think if I had a choice of playing the Worcester Bar in Christchurch, the Box, Calibre, early Ink Bar, considering I've been at Ink Bar for 15 years now, or late Ink Bar, I would take right now over all of them.
I need to get out more. How do you manage those hours these days, man? I suppose it's only once a week. I find that I get tired earlier now. So you're just so in 15 years, if I've got to do that at that time, your body kind of knows, yep, it's that time of the week again.
Leah and I might go out for a drink after she finishes work on a Friday, but by 9 o'clock we'll probably be back home. Yeah. Most of the time she'll come out, but we'll go to bed at 9:30. Oh,
you have a little nap before you go and do it?
Yeah, it's just religious now.
Yeah.
Go to bed between 9:30, sleep to 11, get up, 2 to 3 shots of tequila, boom, in a cab at Ink Bar, ready to go.
That is the thing I've never been able to do. You know, that's the thing I've never been able to do, is those micro naps. That's what fucks me up. I can do 8 hours or nothing.
Oh, there's been a few times where I've been out and it's just like, oh my God, how am I going to get through? And I don't need to be doing it like this because it's too hard. And then you just go into the mind games with yourself and I hate that feeling of hitting the wall. And I've only felt like I've hit the wall once probably in the last 3 or 4 years where I've been playing and it's like, oh my God, I've got another hour to go. And thankfully it wasn't at Ink Bar, it was at a private party.
Yeah. Just going to autopilot.
And I just felt myself slowing down.
Yeah.
And I just find that nap, a few shots, and bang, my mind feels refreshed. And it's
there you go, folks. 90 minutes of sleep, 3 shots of tequila, 1 taxi.
But apparently they say sleep works in 90-minute patterns.
Right.
So basically, if you set your alarm for 90 minutes, and I've got an app that sort of predicts it, allowing just that time for you to fall asleep.
Get into a little bit of REM.
I think it allows for 14 minutes. And if you just work on 90-minute cycles, you can wake yourself up feeling really sharp.
And then you said you're back in the... Did you say you're back in the studio again at the beginning?
I've got everything ready to go again. And
what do you think you're going to be making? What sort of?
I've got 200 unfinished tracks to start with.
Really?
So even if I just feel like finishing those, and usually it's easier just to pull up a session and then I'll start tinkering with it and something fresh will come out.
Are these from the last 10, 15 years? Yeah. So all sorts of styles, because you went in a really different direction with Angela, eh? I'm not sure I was living here then, but that was a real change in direction of sound, eh?
Well, I reflect on it now. At the time, it was. At time, a lot of people didn't like it.
Yeah.
personally, house music needed it. House music had become...
Where are we? 2004?
Yep. House music had become really dull and boring. It had become nothing but... It felt like...
The most dull end of paper recordings boring, or...?
I think I'd leave paper out of the equation,
Yeah.
but I would definitely bring in anyone who you just used a sample in a loop and opened the filter and just thought putting some drums on top of it constituted house music, because it no longer did. And
do you mean people were sort of banking on the success of house music?
Well, it had just become... For me, it was beige and bland, and there was no excitement, and I kept saying to Nick Dwyer and to Pressure, I said, why can't house music have those bass lines that drum and bass has got? Like, they sounded exciting.
Yeah.
They were like, I was feeling that shit. And then Electro Clash came along, which really appealed to me, the punky side of it. And for me, it felt like a fresh take on dance music. It reminded me
It's got a kind of live music feel meets dance music.
And it reminded me of going out and dancing in the early to mid 80s as well.
Yeah.
And who said these are the parameters? For me, it basically paid immense homage to Cabaret Voltaire and to I can't remember, thousands of bands.
But I guess you're saying people were like funny about it with you. I guess people, but they were like they had the rug pulled out from under them, but you couldn't go on doing the same thing.
Well, and as I say to people, you've been listening to house music for 5 years. I've been listening to it for almost 20 years
I've
now.
heard
And you know what? I took a punt playing house music in the first place, so I'm kind of turning my back on it at this point. And like Electro Clash sort of morphed into Electro House.
You started making it as well as playing it, right?
Yeah. And then this thing with Angela just took off. And
so she was the other person really into Electro Clash at the time, and you found each other kind of thing.
And she was a good friend, and we found we'd go buying records, and we ended up having the same records, and we started doing the show on BFM. George came along and poached us and paid us money to do a radio show, and suddenly we had the second highest rating show on George.
Wow.
And we were putting on gigs that were pulling 1,000 people at a time.
Yeah.
And it was just like this great roller coaster, and there was great music being made and produced. By the end, I sort of fell out of love with the music. I felt like it had got too hard. I was kind of over it. I was searching for something different. But what had happened by the time we called it quits is it felt like house music, and it probably happened a few years early, had rediscovered itself.
Yeah.
It went back to the blueprint of house was a drum machine and a mono synthesizer.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
House music had rediscovered, because electro had essentially did that. All they did with the bass line was pretty much initially was open the filter up on the bass line.
Yeah.
And it felt like house and techno was doing it as well. I've never considered myself an expert on techno at all, but it felt fresh. There's always those reactions when something goes hard. People will go, just chill the fuck down. And there was that whole new strand of deep house that came through, and you could feel those big bass lines again, and it had the funk in it. And for me, it was just like, that was 10 years of going full tip.
What's the 10 years? Electro Clash?
The Oral Trash thing.
Yeah, was it 10 years?
It was 10 years,
Goodness.
yeah. And it was like, you know what? I fell in love with house music again.
2004 to 2014, Electro Clash.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so the early part of it passed me by, bro, because I was living in Melbourne and I was in my own kind of pocket of music. Just for the nerd in me, what are some artists I can check out from when you first were like, fuck, what's this? Wow. Got anyone come to mind that I can go back and retrospectively check out in the Electro Clash?
Oh, God, let me think. No, I can't remember off the top of my head at all.
You're like me. You're like me. I used to play all these records. I don't know the names of them. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's like some of the breaks guys, like early plump DJ.
Yeah,
the great thing was it just wasn't like 4/4. There was just that breaks influence, which I just absolutely adored it.
Yeah.
Plump DJs, the early Stanton Warriors stuff.
Oh, that's interesting, because that was called breaks in Aussie, so that's Electro Clash.
Well, no, it was sort of tied in under this big umbrella, which was kind of like mixtures of...
And you're right, it is kind of house and drum and bass and hip-hop and a bit of everything. Kind of,
yeah.
So people who are not... some of our listeners are going, God, it's getting a bit nerdy now. It's getting a bit...
Oh, it's going to get nerdier.
It's going to get nerdier. I don't get it. So, okay. And then you rediscover house music. You're doing some masterclass sessions. Were you teaching for a little bit? I never knew you taught. What's a masterclass session?
Oh, those were with the British Council.
What, really?
Yeah, yes. I did a couple of those. And
what does that mean?
People wanted to come and hear me talk about DJing.
Cool. In New Zealand?
Yes, yeah.
But the British Council did it in New Zealand?
The British Council sponsored me, and then I went over...
Because you're playing British music?
No, not really sure how it all came about when I try and think about it. But then they sort of flew me over to the UK as well.
Wow, and it's just a public space here, like one of those sponsored talks, and people would go to see great chat.
I think we did. There was one in the town hall.
Yeah.
And
wow.
You
did the whole town hall?
Yeah, and then the ATS
just you speaking on the headline.
Me and Jim Barron from Crazy P.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really crazy.
And I can't remember who the second one was.
And so who'd you talk to in the UK?
Oh, they just flew me over there and let me play some gigs.
Really?
Yeah.
The British Council, I don't know if you're aware of this, back in the day, I don't know, this is only my experience, I don't know if it happened in the 80s or whatever, but people like John Pell, who were promoting acts like Mad Professor and so on, there was British Council involvement to actually make those gigs happen here.
Right,
because it was early on it was a big funding risk. So they've
I
really
think,
supportive of quite esoteric and underground activities, it sounds,
I think Lightspeed and Chris O'Donoghue may have been involved in some way, and Julian Cook.
Because you think, something like that, you hear the British Council, I don't even know sort of who they are and stuff, you'd imagine they'd have quite sort of twee conservative taste, but here you go, they do these. Yeah. I saw, actually that's when I watched both of them, there were two parts. You did a On the Couch thing with Red Bull that was super interesting as well. They're still floating around online? Just someone chatting to you very much like this. Do you remember doing that?
Yes, I do. Right.
Yeah, they're a good listen too, folks. You touched on it a little bit before, and it's something I struggle with for years, even maybe with the perception of people like my family and stuff. You've been doing this so many years now. Do you think that like dance music and DJing and clubs and that whole thing is still weirdly represented, or sometimes you feel like people just still don't get it, and so on and so on and so on? Have you faced that? I mean, not that you'd care either way, but have you kind of faced a bit of that? Sort of, what are you looking at there?
It's Lisa.
Oh, can't see you.
Yeah.
It's not like that we're a rock band. It's like
it certainly was for a long time, and it kind of people often said, it used to be quite grumpy DJing, and it was like, well, it was kind of more like I'm just trying to keep my head down here and just hope that you like it and do my best. And these days it's
no, I don't mean sorry, not you. I'm saying like the whole dance music scene. Do you think it's still kind of maligned by? No, not like it used to be.
No, it was absolutely the inferior cousin for a long time. But I think by the time the late 80s rolled around, it was definitely stepping out of the shadow. And you just even have to look at like Peter Ehrlich, one of the great icons of New Zealand rock. Stepping in as a DJ with Nice and Ehrlich and the barriers that were broken down there. But I just think it's just everywhere now. You go to any given bar, there's a good chance it's going to be like four to the floor house music and in some form being played, which essentially is part of everyone's weekend soundtrack.
Because I noticed when they had you on RNZ, was your mixtape. On RNZ, which I sort of thought, it's good journalism. They somehow brought up drugs, like, do you take drugs or da-da-da like that? And I thought to myself, you haven't done that with other people who've been on the mixtape. To me, it was a real kind of like, I put DJ culture in this box, so I better ask that question. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's the sort of things I'm getting at. I'm kind of like, why does that need to be? Surely every scene has had its what would you call it? It's intoxicants, it's stimulants. Why pin that on the DJ when he's come in to do a mixtape because he's been doing this thing for 30 years?
Like, I'm not really sure. I don't really converse with or come into contact with too many musicians who. Well, and I do know many, but they all seem to come from the same sort of strand as I do these days. But there was definitely that feeling that DJs and dance music was some sort of inferior product at the bottom of the food chain when it came to entertainment.
And what's running the music industry now, folks? It's some son or daughter of hip hop or house, or right. The Big Day Out tour. How was that? It must have been kind of nuts. You did the whole. Jeepers, look at that weather. You did the whole circuit at one point, right?
Yeah, and really that was quite an important part of an important part of my career, like especially when it came to production, because the people that I met on that tour, particularly Darren Emerson,
right,
who had just left Underworld at the time, and Born Slippy was probably like the biggest track on the planet, and essentially that was his track, and he played after me at the Auckland gig, and I played the Subway remix I had done of Disco Hoopla, and he absolutely loved it. I had it on vinyl, and he was like, "Give me that track." And I was just like, "Wow, Darren Emerson just took an ass for my track." And then he came on next track, and he starts with Born Slippy, and I turned around and went, "You can't."
Oh, that's good. You'd established a rapport by then.
And he just laughed his ass off. And honestly, the place just went berserk to it. And then he played Fatboy Slim, what is
Rockefeller Skank or something like that, one of those big ones.
One of the big, and they weren't even released at this point. Yeah. The place just went to another level, and I thought I'd played great.
But hadn't you just played one of the biggest sets of your life to 5,000 or 6,000 people?
Yeah. But it just went to another level with him coming on. Yeah. The next morning, I had to fly to the Gold Coast, which was like the first of the Australian gigs, which would be on the Sunday. And I walk into thankfully I was a Qantas Club member for some reason, and I walk into the Qantas lounge, and there he is, and he's like, "Hey Greg, how you doing?" And we just struck up a rapport from that.
That's great.
And then
still in touch?
Now and again, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
But for that period of time, what happened on the tour, went for 3 weeks around Australia, is that in the evenings, because you'd play Friday, travel the Saturday to the next destination, play the Sunday, and then you'd pretty much just have Monday to Thursday. You'd have
next round. There'd be 2 weekends worth or something.
So then you'd just have these days. You'd be in the hotel. And I hung out with the Pinal guys all the time, but everyone would be down basically at the bar in the hotel.
But all the big huge tier rock, all the big main stage guys as well. So you're all on this big thing together.
Yeah, many of them. Ronnie Size was down there all the time. And, and Darren, I just remember just sitting there, just chatting to him for weeks.
That's awesome.
And then I was just chatting to him online one night, and he was in Brazil, and I said, "I've got these tracks, do you want to have a listen to them?" And he signed Badonkadonk the next day.
And that is your biggest tune, right? Commercially anyway, or sales-wise.
Yeah, well, that and the next one, Body Slander, both went to the UK Top 100. And I'm not talking dance, I'm talking pop.
Great.
Yeah. And how
does that work business-wise, Greg? Do you see any money back from that sort of thing?
No, because I signed a rotten deal.
With your mate Darren.
Yeah. Well, typical. First deals that you sign are generally not in your favour. Yeah. But you're only too happy to have your tracks signed and released. And Underwater was probably the biggest house label on the planet at that point. It was like DJ Mag. It was only DJ Mag and Mix Mag really at the time. And Jockey Slut, I suppose. But they had it's like the label of the year.
Wow.
And, it was just like, oh my God, they've signed me. And you just grab the pen and sign your signature.
But he said you guys were mates, so how did it was just his standard record company deal?
Yeah.
And why didn't you...
I wouldn't go so far to say it as mates, but But we did. We were acquaintances, friends.
Yeah. So, till the pen came out.
But then at the end of the day, yeah.
And why didn't you tour off the back of that overseas?
There was health issues.
Yep.
And I had a frightening flight from here to... I had some gigs in the UK.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to die, to be honest.
Wow, did the whole plane think that?
No, I didn't tell anyone, but I was in so much pain.
Wow.
I had prostate problems and sort of had them kind of off and on ever since. But the whole experience frightened me so much.
So you didn't want to be in the air for a long period of time in case something happened?
Yeah, and you're sitting there and it was making it worse.
Because of the pressure in the cabin and all that.
And so I've only the furthest I've flown since then is Fiji.
Well, you just said you're getting that all sorted, and you also said that you're in the best phase of your life mentally, so, hey, got to travel.
We'll see what happens
the
next
10 years.
But sometimes when you're faced with experiences where you're not really sure, you're in so much pain, there's very little that can be done.
And you just kept, you just kept it cool on the plane, didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And suffered all the, like for 27 hours.
Ah, man proud. What male pride, what a silly place we put ourselves in. So from the big day out,
put it this way, I turned down a residency in Ibiza.
Wow, well, you said you said musically maybe hey, head back to Ibiza at least for a show or two, or back to Ibiza to Ibiza. How did you? Because it's a circle and a scene that's your life. Like anyone in a whatever they come up and what they do in their world and so on. So a colleague and a friend. How did Swane passing hit you, man? Was that?
Well, I got a phone call on the Sunday night, and I was just.
Are you okay with me? I think it's important to sort of talk about it.
I knew something wasn't right with him probably about a month beforehand, and I was a shocking golf player, but I'd go and play golf with him.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where we were...
He was good, obviously.
We were good friends, really close, and then we kind of drifted apart, I suppose. And we just sort of started... We would only see each other because we were sort of tied up with... he was going to the UK to play. I was going over there to play as well. And we'd often be playing together on gigs, and then that friendship went outside the clubs to, like on a Tuesday morning we'd go play golf.
Yeah.
In Ellerslie, and then we kind of drifted apart, and we'd only sort of see each other at gigs, but there was just still that great love and fondness, and in a way because we were also like two people releasing on overseas labels. Pretty much at the same time. And then I just remember there was a gig.
Lots of parallels and a really good friendship too.
Yeah. There was a gig at Ink, and I went up to give him a hug, and he was just... I was like, my God, you're big. You need to lose some weight.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling really concerned about him after I went home. And then the next weekend, we played this gig... at this other club that was in the K Road Ballroom that had opened. I can't remember the name of it now. But anyway, he had a vaping cigarette, or someone had a vaping, and I got under the booth, under where he's playing, and I was just like trying to be a smoke machine for him. And I thought it was a hilarious joke, and it was the sort of joke he would play on somebody, or he would just laugh his ass off at it. But he didn't this time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just remember thinking, oh God, I hope I haven't upset him. And then 2 weeks later, he's
obviously just standing there, kind of holding it down, probably feeling ill.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And those last sort of experiences with him do kind of like haunt me a little bit.
Well, you didn't do anything
No,
untoward or
the-
wrong. He was just not in a good way.
Yeah, those are my last sort of the impressions, really, I suppose, as opposed to the great laughter and all the funs and the times at Calibre and him and me and Bevan and Roger and and there's sort of this group of us that when we were playing at the Box and Core Celeb and just all those hundreds of other gigs that we were constantly on the same lineups for and I absolutely loved the direction his music had gone when he was playing out. And I remember going into, I'd played in Ink one night and I'd gone through to Coherent where he was playing and I was just like, what's this track? Oh my God, this is great and this is amazing. And it felt like that he had really pushed his sound in another direction as well. It got a little bit more sort of techier and tough, but still with that funk and that soul that he always brought to it as well. And I could tell that he was searching for music. And there's something I've always admired, I've always respected in people who music that I wouldn't necessarily by myself,
but it's their thing. It's their
or play. But I hear other people play it, and I feel it, and I can sense it. And I'm like, wow, And often I'll find out what it is, and I'll take it home, and it kind of won't work in my context. But it's just
like you were saying back with him. So it sort of sounds like as happens with any group of friends. I've got soulmates who I haven't spoken to for the last 5 years, whatever. That's just life, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying that even within those extended circles and so on, that kind of no one really knew that his health was that bad until he passed.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I maybe for the last 12 months, 18 months, I'd not really spent time with him. I hadn't really seen him.
Yeah. And went to the funeral. I heard it was, it's an odd word to use, but there are good and bad funerals. I heard it was a good funeral.
I thought it was magnificent.
Yeah, amazing to see. Again, a sort of a culture, whatever. It sounds like a lot of people kind of didn't know him, but he'd touched them in some way, turned up as well.
And then later that night at Ink Bar, I played, and that was just like, it was perfect, really. Just the people that turned up, and I think I spent the last the last 15 minutes just played his music.
Wow. Where do we go from here? I was going to ask. That's really touching, man. And it's a curious thing, and I think it's like it's as tragic as it is. I think the one positive thing that can come from something like that is for the rest of us, we kind of look at where we are, and and we sort of you know what I'm saying without having to say it. I was thinking back to before when you were talking about record labels and so on. And we joked a little bit about the pen being mightier than the sword, as it were. How would you do it now if you released music, Greg? Because you've got that luxury of just kind of putting it out there. Would you just chuck it up on Beatport or? Yeah,
well, I've actually still got there's the label that Angela and I set up, Move to Trash, which is still there, and I actually set up 3 years ago a new label. DNR, which I'd only done one release on, but I had 10 records ready to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's just what I'll do.
And then there's how do you, because you got your name from all this long period of time, but then outside of that, I guess the record company thing these days is useful just for getting noticed, right? So how do you promote it? I don't know whether...
I think it's just good to have it out there.
Post it on Facebook, bro.
Well, first of all, I think it's like just put it up there and put it for sale.
Yeah.
And then you've just got to almost these days just... It's been good to sit back and look at it.
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Yeah.
That way no one's telling you you should change this or change that, because I've been down that road and you know what? They can get fucked.
Well, you've also said you had a deal where you didn't see any money, so it's not like you're losing anything by doing it this way.
So, but I think you've got to keep re-releasing it, and then you've just got to start giving it away. But who knows? You've also I think, just start hitting the major labels. Just look at the big ones and just keep throwing stuff at them. You never know. But I think you can't rely on them to release your music. I think the best thing to do is to do the indie thing, release it yourself on a small label, and then hopefully maybe one of the bigger ones will grab it. Which is kind of, when I go right back to college indie rock or whatever. That's how they all did it
it's
as well.
gone back to punk.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There was this weird thing where these big corporations got involved in the middle, and now we're back to like even before that era. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think it was probably about the early '60s when shifting units, to use the industry parlance, became the be all and end all of the music industry, rather than music in general. But I love how we've actually gone back to what it was before that, which was actually playing live and getting out there and doing shows. Used to be the centre of how you, and that's still bringing people together. It's like so that's the thing. But to me, and all of that, it's just that just getting whatever it is on the map. If you can get it on the map, then you can do all those things. It's just that little perplexing bit at the minute of how you do that first bit. What do you think of Lord? Okay, what do you think of the hype surrounding Lord?
I'll be perfectly honest. When I first heard Royals, there were three things that really annoyed me about that record. There wasn't enough reverb on the clap for my liking. The bottom end seemed to fart like crazy in the car, which suggested that it hadn't been treated properly.
It sounded like a bedroom production.
And the clap with a snare annoyed me immensely. Now, and people took me as a hater, and I would say to people, tell me why you like the track. Very few people can actually tell you, other than, they like it. Like, I love it. But can you tell me why you like it? I can tell you why I don't like it. And these little things are annoying me about it, which are hindering my ability to actually,
access it.
Yeah. But, and so, in a way, she went worldwide. And then the latest single, I remember when it hit, the one with the piano and everything, I remember sitting down and listening to it, and I had a couple of conversations on the go with people's opinions who in the dance music and house music industry, and I said, this sounds like 100 other house tracks that were released.
Is this from this latest batch of music? Yeah.
In the UK, particularly, as opposed to the US stuff. But it sounds like 100 other UK tracks that could have been released between 1993 and 1998.
Yeah. You're starting to pop a little. I'll just...
Having said that, I've had the curiosity of the earworm where that track just keeps getting into my head.
So it's done the pop music job.
It's done the pop music job. And you know what? And I find myself... I don't know if I like it, but
you can see how it works.
I'm tolerating it.
Yeah. So you like it better than Royals?
But this is what I forgot to mention is Royals did that to me as well.
Yeah.
But
I hum that fucker as well when I'm like I don't even play it.
And for me being picky and going, there's these little elements I don't like about it. It's done its job because it's absolutely earwormed me.
Yeah.
And when you think of like the million other tracks out there, and that latest one just keeps popping into my head.
I think you've just done a really thorough treatment of approaching that from both ends of the argument. What do you call play the devil's advocate with yourself? And you're the first person of about 4 or 5 people I've asked on this that have actually broached the question properly. So thank you. My take on it is, and again, I've stopped publicly posting the couple of times I did once. I was kind of trolling. The other time I was a bit more constructive. My thing is nothing to do with her and that amazing success story, and I'm not saying she doesn't have talent. It's not any of that stuff. Yeah. So there's a first thing there, in that I think people got a little over exuberant about the talent thing when I heard her likened to people like Prince and so on. So never mind that. But my thing with that actual tune with Royals, and then I realised where this had come from, and it's that, I guess, that luxury we have of having chased music so many years, that I realised I probably heard a lot more stuff than other people have. And what Royals was to me was, even though it was good, it was okay, is it reminded me of very much a sound in 90s kind of trip hoppy electronica that I've heard done better, but that didn't take off. I'm trying to think of who I could liken it to. Do you shoot me down if you think that's wrong? It's very of an era to me.
One of the first comments I made on Facebook at the time is I would rather listen to Joni Mitchell, Kate Bush, or Liz Fraser from the Cocteau Twins.
But then if you do that, Greg, you get accused of just lumping her in the female artist basket. It never ends, eh? Yeah, thanks. You still doing radio?
Yes.
Yeah.
George
Oh.
FM.
Hodaki, how'd that go? Was that weird going into like the rock zone and doing a dance show? Or did you just sort of do it under the radar when no one was in the office?
Yeah, no, it was all pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Doing it to go in there from 10 till midnight was just an awful proposition.
Yeah.
So we would go in. Nick and I went in on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock, and we'd pre-record it. It was weird because it would then come on the radio between 10 and midnight, and I'd never listened to it hardly. And
did you get any feedback? Because the media environment's so fractured now. Was anyone like, oh, Greg, I heard your show at 10 to 12 on Radio Harrogate?
I think it gets more feedback now from the SoundCloud postings that Nick put up and created than it did back then. There'd be a handful of texts, and there'd be the old schoolers going, oh, what's this music sort of thing? And then when David Riddler, who was station manager at the time,
had him in on here. He was great.
Was absolutely just unbelievably supportive.
Yeah,
and
he's a great man.
He truly is. I can't say enough about how encouraging he was to us and what he taught us. But the moment he left, I think David was out the door. 24 hours later, we were history as well. But then within 24 hours, I had George knocking on the door.
And you know what's funny about that? You probably don't know this. So today, because I did my obligatory 3-page Google research on my guest, it was like in it for the kicks, and it was a Radio Hauriki link, and I clicked on it, but the SoundCloud embedded on the Hauriki page said this track is removed. so they'd really gone back to their rock roots. Oh, you look gutted.
For me, I was totally gutted because Hauraki had this opportunity that obviously the bigwigs didn't believe in David's vision.
Yeah, well, it would have gone over their head.
Of creating like this idea of what BFM used to be,
where all the old people who used to listen to B had gone could come,
and where it was a mishmash of dance and indie and
totally
whatever. But and for me, when Nick and I approached them, it was just like, this is exciting to be part of.
Oh, I thought it was cool. Yeah,
but again, it came down to ratings and and dollars, and no one wanted to take Mikey seriously at all, and.
He's sounding good on breakfast, and he's turning up on time.
I know,
he sounds a little bit more humbled, and I say good on him.
He sounds wonderful. And
I think there's this pressure, and I was saying to someone about this the other day. I think there's often this pressure that you start somewhere and you have to move on. But hey, if Mikey fits on 95 BFM breakfast, and he's back there and he's happy, and the listeners are happy, then the man that says he should have moved on, well. That's that man's opinion, because,
But sometimes we just have to, we have to make these journeys, these journeys to realise where we actually need to be. And for me, it's the
how
same.
many times? What time? Not remember. Was this back at George? You back the second time, the third time?
Second time. Yeah. But I never thought I'd be back after I had like quite a shit fight with the guy that was doing the roster, but. He left about 6 months after that, but I'd sort of like given up hope of coming back, and then Jay Bulletproof rang me and said, "Let's have a beer." And
great. And what time slot are you doing?
We're doing Fridays now from 1 till 2.
Right, that's why I don't hear it, because I'm always working Fridays 1 to 2.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant time spot.
1 to 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
that's a very short show. Why are they doing hour-long shows?
I love 1 hour.
You play 3 Freddy's records and then you go home.
Absolutely, yeah. I could play the whole side of a James Brown album, which people think is one track. And,
a Fela Kuti, track.
Or some Go-Go records, Trouble Funk.
So what do you use? Is it the Greg Churchill kind of house thing, or is it whatever you want to bring to that hour on Friday afternoon?
It's pretty much just what you could expect if you're coming out tonight. I went through this period about 3 years ago where I kind of wanted to dabble with stuff that I used to play. Because I used to play hip hop as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of funk and stuff. And I learned a valuable lesson from that, as much as I had to kind of get that out of my system, I suppose. And I sort of played these Thursday night gigs at Ginger Minx, and I loved it. But people would turn up and they'd go,
This isn't Greg Churchill.
"That's exactly it." And what I learnt from that is, you know what, I'm at my best when I play house.
Yeah. Well, I guess it encompasses all of that. It'd be a fun night to book like you and Roger and a bunch of those people of that ilk to all play what you were playing back in the day. And then you got the safety and numbers thing for the night. Get Roger to bust out his Soul to Soul sound system UK set.
I'm not really sure. The thing is, I was playing house back then, so I suppose I would probably just go for the house. The people, I noticed it on more than a few occasions, just going, "Oh, hang on, I saw your name on the flyer," and I could be playing house from 20 years ago, and it would still be house and the groove and the rhythm and everything that is part of the music, and especially in 2017, it feels like the music of the last 3 or 4 years fits brilliantly with the stuff from 20 years ago.
When I had Murray Kamikin, because your journey sounds quite different. I love how you've talked about, I kind of went on that kind of Electro Clash thing, and then I felt the kind of house I was into kind of come on back, production got better, went back to the roots, da-da-da-da-da. Murray Kamikin came in the other week, and he was basically like, I've just stayed in the same spot for 40 years, and every now and again what I'm into is kind of works, and then it goes away for 15 years, and then it comes back. And I kind of liked that as well. There's something I just play old soul and kind of drink red wine and hang out at the decks, and sometimes it's in and sometimes it's not, To the future, Greg, what do you want to... It's a cliched end to a conversation, but what do you see happening?
You're going to ask me if I'm going to retire?
What are you happening in the next few years? Oh, you're going to retire? You're going to retire?
No.
What does that even mean?
No, I've become more picky with what I want to play.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely not going to retire, no.
Okay, so what's on the cards for the next few years?
Well, it's going to just be me playing house music.
I want to end there. That's awesome. Cheers. Thanks, mate.